there's a way for science to explain it. But if you believe it, then it is that vision. With the Northmen, I think initially Sjón felt less restricted than me because the material belongs to him and his culture. And so I imagine that Sjón felt the freedom to just be. But whereas I like to keep myself like imprisoned in research, I think for the research for me, one of the things that I find about it that's the most helpful is that you can't make as many choices because it can't be anything. It has to be this. And you've discovered that this is the fact and you have to stick to it. I think, Sjón, you can say if you disagree, but one of the things that was tough was when we had a draft of the Northmen that we really both liked a lot. And then we gave it to the first 3 Viking experts. And there were things that needed to change if we were going to do it correctly. And so the challenge was to like, how do we do something better than we had before that matches what's correct, even though we were really happy with what we had? How is that for you?
Yeah. I think the nice discovery for me was that Robert wanted to be much more authentic than I, in a way, needed to be as someone who comes from a tradition of telling these stories, because basically the Icelanders have never stopped telling these stories. The stories take place in the late 9th, early 10th century, and they have been retold over and over again in different forms in Iceland ever since. And that is a fact. The great moment of telling the stories is in the 13th, 14th century when the sagas are written, but we've never stopped retelling them and reshaping them. And that means that we naturally give ourselves, let's say, quite a large poetic license. Mm-hmm. The poetic license is quite big. And so I think we were a perfect match, because who in a way the stories belong to, I approached it from that angle with certain kind of freedom. And then Robert came asking for the authenticity and accuracy and the historical remaking of the world had to be right. So I think we matched very well there. And then obviously the specialists came and pointed to things that we needed to work on. And that was simply amazing to discover how much more was there than we even had known before. And I felt it was always liberating for the material because they obviously know it so well. They knew it better than the both of us. So they came with options that made everything just better. But I think in the end, the approach that you can see in the Northman is that while the reality, the outer world of the images that you see are as authentic as possible, as recreations of the time that story takes place in. But there is also in it to have a sense of the freedom of the storytellers of the 12th, especially of the 12th and 13th century, and their approach to that reality, how they admitted as early as that the inner reality of the characters is manifesting in the outer reality. And then, of course, what is possible in cinema and what Robert is a genius at is manifesting visually the inner beliefs and experiences of the characters.
How do you guys think about historical epics? Are you having conversations about movies from the past, or are you so into the actual story, your culture, your heritage, what the experts are saying, that you're really focused on this thing in a different realm?
I think with this movie, we maybe talked about films less than some other things we've been currently working on. But certainly, I always watch a lot of films in the process. Conan the Barbarian's on the mind. Spartacus is on the mind. All of Kurosawa's samurai canon is on the mind. And then to some degree, even films that I'm not trying hard to emulate, Gladiator and Braveheart, are on the mind too. They certainly are good films that really work. And I think we talked about some of that stuff, Sjón. We talked about on very much.
Just to add to the list, there's Andrei Rublev, obviously, by Tarkovsky, but there is also a lesser-known Czechoslovakian film called Markéta Lazarova, and another Russian film called Hard to Be a God. In those films, you have a recreation of the past, but you've got an incredible intensity in the storytelling that you do not find in the films, in the American films, for example. There is something about how they drive the characters over the limits, they drive the performance over the limit, that was very inspiring. What I personally am very proud of in the film is that how we use all the beats of the hero's journey, but at every moment you have the hero taking the next step according to, let's say, the more formulaic American film. We allow the hero to take that step, but that step is undermined immediately afterwards. So just to take an example from the beginning of the film, when young Amleth escapes the island after the massacre and the killing of his father, this is the moment where you set the main character as a character you will follow through anything. You put the stake of sympathy right into the audience's hearts. And what happens? The next thing we see, he's a grown-up. Okay, we see he's a grown-up. He's a lost man, but he goes through a horrible massacre of innocents in a faraway country. It's very difficult to regain the sympathy for him again after that, but we do. And what do we do when we regain the sympathy? We do the same thing. So I think we managed to do some very interesting things with storytelling here.
I will avenge you, Father. I will save you, Mother. I will kill you, Father.
With the Northman, when we started, Robert, you already had 3-4 pages of storyline, and we sat down to work on that, and it grew to like a 12-page storyline, and we sent that back and forth and discussed that, and then it became even larger than that, and then I was ready to have a go at the first draft. You were going into preparation at the time for Nosferatu, if I remember correctly, and when the first draft was ready, that became our playground, and it's been very much a back and forth on the dialogues, especially because English is not my native language. And Robert, your input in the dialogues and reshaping dialogues and all of that has been very much a part of it, and for me a learning experience as well.
But I would say generally until Sjón does the heavy lifting and once to get to us to the first draft, and he breaks the first draft. Once I do my pass on that, then it's constant back and forth.
How do you think about real and unreal in your films? Do you care? Is it supposed to be a really blurry line of what's real and what's not real for the character or the viewer?
Yeah, it should be blurry, certainly in the Lighthouse, I think, and in the Northman, all the basically, if you believe in this stuff, it's true. That's where I'm at with it. I think Oliver Sacks wrote a good book on hallucinations, and he's saying if you can get yourself in, just through prayer alone, you can get into a state where you're seeing visions. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's a way for science to explain it, but if you believe it, then it is that vision. So certainly, like in the Northmen, these Old Norse people believe in the Norns and Odin and the living dead, and so it's real for them. And in the Lighthouse, as Pattinson gets more obsessed with what is going on in there, the more real it becomes to him. But although interestingly, Rob told me, I don't want to make a movie about a magical lighthouse. I want to make a movie about someone going crazy. But in his absolute moment of insanity, he believes then all the stuff that Defoe believes in is real, if that makes sense. Maybe David Lynch and Buñuel would criticize me for being so black and white about being gray.